Why is it important to know how to code, and what impact does that have on other areas of your life particularly?
I love coding and I have always been curious about it. My little brother, he does coding. So, it's often associated as a boys thing, right, to code. And I personally doubted myself many, many times that I cannot code, it must be hard. But there was this sort of rebel inside me who was saying that, yes, you should try it. Why is it that you are all of a sudden supposing that you can't do it and it's only your brother who can do it, or it's sort of a boys thing? So just that idea that, sort of unconsciously I was telling myself that I can't do it pushed me towards trying it at least. And I think it's good to try it. It's good to at least see it and know that it's not that hard, firstly. I know in the beginning, like when you see all the symbols and all the words, it can become really confusing. And when you start trying, it doesn't mean you have to become a coder. Like, you don't have to become a coder. It's just understanding the concept and just understanding how the language of computer works. You realize, like, we are surrounded by technology these days, from iPhone to watches to TV screens to so many other things. Like, how do these things work? And so it's important that that we question these things, but it's super important for women and girls to also see their role in it. And women have been part of coding in history, and they have played such a significant role in helping us have the technologies that we have today, and women can do much more. So, but also when you see the absence of women and the absence of ethnic groups and the absence of, like, sort of diversity in the way this coding works, you realize, like, it's biased, right? When you don't have the representation of all the voices, you end up with just very few voices, and whatever they produce is very limited, and it's limited to one specific group, the group who is sort of, on the table, who is making those decisions. So even, like, when we look at the coding language, there are biases in there. But when women are part of that work, we can ensure that it is more inclusive, that it looks at, women and girls as well. Because, if women are not there in that place, then sort of those biases continue, and we may not see more women taking interest in it. So when women sort of make that ambition, it can have a huge impact on making it more accessible for girls.
Absolutely. And on that basis, then, do you think to become better professionals, we should all understand coding, or at least have a greater understanding of technology generally?
I would recommend it to everyone that they should try coding at least once. And it's so easy because a lot of these videos are available on YouTube. You can do it all by yourself. It's like learning any language, right? So, you just try to familiarize yourself with the words, with the concepts of it, and with time you realize, like, it starts making sense, I would recommend it to everyone, but especially to girls. Do try at least one lesson in coding.
Good advice. But what impact has learning coding had on other areas of your life?
I enjoy coding, but I will be honest that I found it hard initially. And there are moments when you are like, oh, this is getting a bit too complicated now. Maybe I may not understand it. But with time, you sort of get used to it, and you realize that it is sort of a lot more fun. And the thing I really enjoy about coding is is sort of like how you get introduced to this sort of new language of how computers and technology work around us. Now, one of the most beautiful moments in coding for me is when my brother comes to my room and he sees that I'm doing coding and I know the concepts, and then he asks me questions. So I really love it, like I'm like, I'm a girl, he's a boy, and we're talking about coding, and it's no longer the thing that only boys can do it. And my brother is also learning that at the same time, that his sister can also do coding.
What difference does academic study mean to our professional lives?
What difference does it make, or does it mean?
What does it make to our professional lives? What does it bring? What changes does it bring to our professional lives? What difference does academic study bring to our professional lives?
Mm-hmm. So, I personally, I studied philosophy, politics, and economics, and that was sort of my academic life. I am, I'm an education activist. I am still figuring out what job I want to take, and it's, you try to connect the two, and I'm like, I'm not really using economics in my work, or I'm not really using philosophy in my work, and I'm not using the IR topics that I was studying about, the Cold War or something else. But I think it's, for me, like, there are two things. One is the content and the information that you receive in your academic studies. That is important. But along with that, it's also the skills that you develop, and those are the skills of learning. And I was so grateful that I got to study at Oxford, because they help you in developing independent learning skills, which are important, because we are living in a world where we are receiving new information every day, and things are changing, things are evolving. So we need to be in a position where we can process information, where we can assess information, especially now that we are living in a world where we are surrounded by social media, and there's a lot of fake news, and on social media it's very difficult to figure out what is fact and what is not. So when you are in a position where, in your academic life, you have developed these skills where you can process information and you can figure out, whether it is credible or not, whether it's plausible or not. So for me, even in politics, like when you listen to a prime minister's speech or a president's speech, like looking at the plausibility of what they are saying, like, does it make sense or not? So those things are always very interesting to me. I think along with that, I think in professional life, again, you can bring in these skills. If you are a doctor, I think you do need your academic education. But if you are, an entrepreneur, you may not need as much of your academic education, but you would need the skills that you have developed there.
Let's talk about the Malala Fund. You are working in 8 countries, including Brazil. Tell us about your work in Brazil, and also explain the main goals of Malala Fund, please.
So my father and I were activists in Swat Valley, and so we recognized the power of the activism at the local level. And when we started Malala Fund, the goal was clear and simple. It was to ensure that all girls can have access to education. But we know that it's not limited to just one country. We see that there is discrimination against girls all around the world. So we are working in 8 countries where we see that there are the highest number of girls out of school, but at the same time there's also a gender gap, a gender disparity in access to education. And Brazil is one of the countries where we work, and we also see how there are sort of minority groups where girls are less likely to reach to their to reach to college level, to complete their 12 years of education. And our focus is, in Brazil, we are focusing on the indigenous communities and on the Black communities of girls, because of the difficulties that they face in accessing education. they are less likely to complete their schools. They are more likely to drop out and to and you know they're facing far more barriers when it comes to access to schooling. And we work with the activists in Brazil there who are focusing on these communities, but they're also pushing for national level policies to ensure that the government the government does not stop support for education. There's a financial commitment that we need for education, and I'm really grateful to the work of civil society in Brazil. They play a crucial role, and I think for me, like, I may not have answers to how to solve problems in Brazil, but I know that we can work together with the civil society. We can work together with the girls' education activists to create a society in Brazil where girls can have access to equal opportunities. And we need to ensure that we are reaching out to to girls in the indigenous communities, in the rural communities, because they are facing more problems and more difficulties. They need attention. And they cannot be ignored. So this is the work in Brazil so far.
Let's talk about books. What books have had the most impact on you and why, in a professional sense?
I love reading books, and recently I have become part of a book club as well called Literati. So I get to read novels, fiction, and I like non-fiction as well, biographies. My all-time favorite book has been The Alchemist. That was one of the first books that I read. I also read, A Brief History of Time, and I used to just love physics, even though I had to read that book like 2-3 times just to understand it. And I'm sure if I read it again, I still won't get it. But that is something that I really enjoyed. I really enjoy books by women, and because the books in literature, especially in history, have been limited to men, and we don't see many by women, but it was because of the constraints that women have been facing, or because their work has not been recognized. So it's great to see that we have women authors, and they're writing biographies and novels and fiction, and I love reading their books. Recently, I read 50 Words for Rain. It's a book that is set in Japan, and it's about this young girl, and she is, she's very little, and she's trying to understand where she is, what is her place in society. She is, she doesn't know who her dad was and where he is, and how her skin color is sort of slightly different than everybody else that she sees in her community, and how she's then treated differently because of that, and how she is trying to, find that identity for herself. And many other books, like, from Aftershocks, that was another one by Nadia that I really enjoyed. But I think in terms of like the professional work, I read articles as well. I like keeping an eye on the news, and I like to read about the economy and what's happening in politics, and so that's interesting always. I have read Winners Take All and Factfulness, and those books provide like different kind of perspective of how the world works and what is fair and what's not, and how happy we should be about the progress we are making. But yeah, I enjoy books, and I always think about writing a fiction or a novel or a book, and I feel like I have some stories in my mind, but I don't see it right now, but in future, why not? I'd love to be a novelist.
You talked earlier on about the importance of having people that girls admire, people that inspire. I mean, you inspire so many people. How important is learning from the people we admire, such as authors, scientists, and entrepreneurs?
I think role models play a key role in your life. I personally have been inspired by the struggle and the journey of Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela, and Bacha Khan, who is a Pashtun, political hero of ours, who fought for freedom against the British, and Benazir Bhutto, because she was the first female prime minister of Pakistan, and she, was not just shattering the glass ceiling, but she was, sort of, breaking the sort of the steel blocks right in front of her. So, these are, it's not that they are ideally perfect people, right? We look at Gandhi and other people, and when you read their whole history, you may not find that they were all sort of so perfect, but they, the work that they have done for freedom, for equality, for democracy, it is applauded. And you can look at it you can look at the role of that individual and who they were, but you can also look at the work that they have done slightly separately as well, and you can learn from that. You can take an inspiration from that. How to start a movement, how to fight for a cause that you care about. And one thing that I have learned is that it's really important to be resilient, to be consistent, and to not give up too soon, because it takes time. And if you want to change a status quo, the people that you are challenging would want you to get tired. They would want you to give up soon. So as soon as you give up, you sort of already failed in your mission. You may not, when you are in that struggle, yes, you may not see the goals that you want to achieve that soon, but do not consider that as a failure, because that is part of your journey. So I think it's important that you keep on working hard, because you need to remind the system that you're fighting against. The goal is to ensure that they know that you are not going to give up, that you are on this mission, and that you are gonna make that change for as long as you are there and you are alive. And that's the commitment that I have made for girls' education, that for as long as I am alive and I'm here, I will fight for it till the last day, to ensure that we create a world where all girls can go to school. There are disappointments. You are like, every year these leaders, they don't make the financial commitments that they are supposed to make. Every year we have to wait. 130 million girls are out of school. We heard that number 4 or 5 years ago, and the number is still the same. So why is nothing changing? And yes, we are doing campaigns. So we have pushed for a lot of changes, and that have improved so many things. And at least people are not talking about girls' education. When I think back about 7 or 8 years ago, when I first started my campaign, I remember people were not even mentioning secondary education of girls. But the reality is that is the stage where many girls drop out of school because of the pressure that they face from their family, from the society. They leave their school either because their education is not considered important, or because they're married off at early ages. They do not have the secondary school. So many barriers that are there. But the focus was only on primary education. So, but at that time, you're like, maybe nothing is sort of changing. But when you look back, you do see that you have seen a lot of progress. And if you hadn't been campaigning, it could have been worse. So you may not see the full results yet, but do remember that you're already making progress. And if you stop working on it, maybe that you are in a place where things just remain as they were, and not even a tiny bit changes.
And in terms of your own goals, what is next to come for you, academically, professionally, personally?
My own goals, this is a hard question, because in COVID times, it has really slowed down things for us, and for me personally, because I graduated last year, and just like every other graduate student, I was hoping that I would sort of not go back and live with my parents, but I'll sort of change my life, live maybe sort of on my own. But the pandemic was like, no, I'm going to send you home. And so I've been with my family for a year and a half now, which is strange, like, you know, post-university, living with your family. But I love it at the same time. I don't have to worry about making breakfast for myself or my laundry or anything else. Everything is done for you. Like, your parents just look after you and they treat you like a kid forever. Even though I'm 24, like, they still treat me like a kid. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm like, you know, I'm a spoiled child now. And sometimes I'm like, it's good, you know, if they're doing it for you, have fun, enjoy. But I think for me, I'm just excited about what's next and what's ahead. I don't know much, you know, what that is, but I'm really excited about the work that we do for girls' education. I think that, you know, we have already seen huge progress. And what gives me hope is the work that girls are doing. We see girls activists around the world. They are challenging gun laws. You know, they are talking about climate change. They're telling leaders the truth. They're not scared of anyone. They're like, this is science. These are facts. You know, we don't care who you are, but we want to live in a safe world. We want our future to be protected. Like, climate change is going to impact us and our kids and our grandkids. So, you know, we cannot delay the work because because every day it makes things worse. So we have, you know, activists like Greta. And when I see these, you know, girls like Greta and Vanessa and so many others who are fighting for their rights, who are fighting for clean air, who are fighting for protection, for safety, for reproductive rights, and so many other things, like, that gives me hope. And so whatever it is in future, like, I'm excited for it. I want to see, you know, young leaders. I want to see these young women changing the world, and that shall happen. And I want to see it in every corner of the world. And I, you know, and like in Brazil and in every place where we see young girls and young women, you know, changing the world and making it a better place for all.
How can we best prepare to have meaningful and successful careers?
I think it's up to the individual to decide how they define success for themselves. I feel like, you know, we have been told a lot about what success means. To some of us, you know, it has been told that you have to become a billionaire or a millionaire to become successful, or you have to be the CEO of a company to become a successful person. And somehow these are like sort of the concept that have been floating around us about success. But I think for me personally, I think it's an individual's choice and it's an individual's decision. For me, when you define success for yourself, it's important that you see a purpose in that for yourself, that you connect to it, that you relate to it, and at the same time that you enjoy it, that you feel like it is part of you. It defines who you are. Like, you know, for me personally, like when I look at a painting or some sort of like, I listen to beautiful music, I'm like, this is incredible. I wish I could do that, you know. And sometimes you're like, maybe I should give it a try, but I know I can't do those things, right? So for me, like, you know, it's being in a place where you're actually good at those things, but also that you enjoy those things as well. So I personally stay away from things where I feel like they do not reflect me, and that is not me. You know, I don't feel like myself. But yeah, like I'm still, even though I've been doing the work in education for a long, long time, like I can't believe it's more than 10 years. It's like a decade and a half. But I would still say that I do not have enough experience in sort of career building yet. And I don't know like how we are gonna define it for ourselves. Like, I don't know what career means for me in the next 10, 20 years. But I also don't feel the pressure to choose a career, which might be a good thing in some ways, because you know, with this generation, they feel like you can easily change your mind. The opportunities are there. The world is changing. Like, we didn't have social media, for instance, and today, like, social media has brought sort of new roles and new opportunities, and we see a lot more people like becoming entrepreneurs and really believing in themselves, and they want to become like, you know, business people, but at the same time they care about the environment. They want to become sort of responsible people in society. So I think it's important that you connect to the work that you are doing, and you feel like it's part of you and that you enjoy it.
Malala, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. We wish you the very best with your future.
Thank you so much. It was so nice talking to you.